Agitprop. It's a tactic that the USSR has invented, and then the CIA has also tried to perfect it. It means agitation and propaganda, how to get people on the ground to not only support your cause, but to also promote it for other people free of charge. And one of these interesting tactics is, how do you co-opt an institution? How do you make so that an institution starts seeing things your way and preaches your message? Again, free of charge. Let's take a school, an average school. What does the school do? It teaches students how to have the proper tools in order to get into university and later on have a job in life. Okay, and our goal is to get the school to become Christian. We don't want it to just get kids to have the tools in order to get a university. No, we want the kids to be good, decent Christians as well. Pray every day. Go to church every Sunday. So how do we do this? Okay, how do we get our ideology into this school? Well, you need to get 9% of the teachers to be Christian radicals. And what does a radical mean? Well, a radical is a person that understands the ideology and is actively trying to push it on others. And this is why it's really interesting, is that you don't really need even half of the teachers on that school in order to be Christians. You only need 9%. These are studies that have been done, and this is the number that they usually hover around. Like, the moment you have 9% of those teachers that are radicals, what ends up happening is that because of group psychology, most people like to be non-confrontational. So most people are going to be quiet. And every now and then you might have like a person that talks the wrong way or doesn't get along with the program. Well, the moment that person gets into trouble, those 9%ers are going to try to hype up the problem that the person did, try to get them fired. And whenever there's a hiring process, they're going to advocate to hire someone that thinks like them. And I guarantee to you that in 2 years, those kids are going to start saying prayer before every school session starts. And the advantage is obviously that that school is now going to produce kids that are Christian oriented, and they're going to try to spread the message to other people. So this is how you propagate the ideology. This is agitation and propaganda. And it doesn't have to be religion. That's just one example. It can even be Pokemon. No, seriously, like, you can actually try, to get kids to start collecting Pokemons at that school and create like this culture. All you need is 9%. But they have to be radicals. Okay, so not just some people that enjoy this activity and don't try to push it on others. No, they need to be fanatic about it. They need to try to push this on others. So now that we know how this works, you can replace it with literally anything you want. As I mentioned, it can be conservative values, it can be communism, it can be Islam, doesn't matter, anything. And I'm noticing that certain people are finally waking up to this. And they're pointing out about the quote-unquote civil war that's happening at the New York Times. And it's not happening just at the New York Times, it's happening at Vox. And it's happening at many publications in the English-speaking world. Basically, the number of radicals have grown to a significant amount, to the point where they are going to start a purge. And the purge happens with the people that disagree with them first, and then it goes to the people that are neutral and they don't constantly virtue signal. So if you look at certain gaming companies or comic book companies like Marvel and DC, and you see editors virtue signaling 24/7, and you don't know why they're talking and they're acting like CNN anchors, that is why. It's not necessarily that they legitimately believe the ideology, they're just saying the correct things, hoping that they're not going to be purged by the radicals. So, in this case, a man by the name of Jamie Lindsay is talking about the civil war that's going around at New York Times. And he says that the first thing you need to do is to pack the court with enough sympathizers. 15% is enough. I think 15% is a little bit of overkill, but okay. Find or manufacture precipitating event. So, let's look at the atheism community, because I think everyone is familiar with it. When the atheist community was packed with enough radicals, And these radicals, they communicate with each other, they collaborate with each other. They come up with an event, the elevator gate. And in this case, it was one woman who claimed that while she was in an elevator, someone asked her out for a cup of coffee, like something completely normal. And she exaggerated, saying that's rape culture and that is toxic masculinity, and this is what the atheism community is now, and it needs to change. And in order to change, they need to put people like her in charge so that sexism is eliminated from the atheism community. And this is exactly what it is. It's like raise holy hell about it. It's like, even if it's something that's just normal, you know, like a guy asking a girl out for a coffee, you pretend like it's the worst thing imaginable. You pretend like this is the absolute state of our society. And you do this because the moment common sense person would go like, what on earth are you talking about? Then they can be like, oh, because you don't see how serious this is, it explains why I need to be put in a position of leadership to lecture you and to explain to you constantly why this is bad. And again, like, this is about atheism. You know, I got like nothing to do with it. And finally, it goes into the divide and conquer, racist versus anti-racist, with no neutral allowed. Basically, there's no way you're going to be allowed to not have an opinion on the issue. Like, you must have an opinion, and it needs to be the correct opinion. If it's not the correct opinion, then you're the enemy. And they will attack you. They will try to get you expelled from the community. They will try to get you deplatformed. They will try to destroy your reputation. And this is how it works. You know, and this is how many communities have been destroyed in the past. Communities that have nothing to do with politics, communities that, like the fucking knitting community. The fucking knitting community. Can you imagine? Like knitting, what is less political than knitting? And this is very destructive because it's a parasitic ideology. It does not care about the well-being of that particular community. And it derails all of the conversations of that community into something else. So you can now have the greatest knitter in the world, you know, the grandmother that has a golden cup behind her, winning the knitting competition. But if she doesn't say the correct things and she doesn't believe the right principles, then she can be ousted out of that community. And the community, the knitting community, loses a very good member just because she's not on board with the recent politics. It's disgusting, really. It's horrible what is happening. And I don't know how to call this. Like, a lot of people call them differently. On Fox News, it's the cult of allies. On YouTube, I guess it would be like the cult of intersectionality. On Twitter, it's the cult of woke. But you know what we're talking about. It's that it's a worldview, really. And it's such an ingenious worldview that has been taught at universities. And then when you look at anything that's apolitical, any business, any corporation, any type of fandom, doesn't matter, any type of hobby, like, they are all risking getting co-opted by this because it's a worldview. The people doing the co-opting, the radicals, don't even need to know each other. They don't even need to be friends with each other. Like, they recognize each other based on a couple of dog whistles and a couple of ways of using buzzwords. And once they recognize and they assess that they're on the same team, it's very similar to like a religious group that goes into a company and they believe that they need to add their religion into that company. That's why I gave the evangelicals as an example. You know, they go into a school and they're like, well, we should have kids praying and we should have kids learn a little bit about God in school. Even though the purpose of the school is to teach people to get a job and an education, and religion and everything else should be taught by the parents at school. In my case, like when I was at the high school, that's what people thought. It's like, no, they need to learn about God in school. And again, like I'm not casting judgment whether that is right or wrong, but I'm saying that the tactics, the way they would impose that, and it would make it happen, is very similar to what I see the cult of the woke do now. They get into an institution and then they immediately try to get other people like-minded in that institution, and when they reach a number like 9 or 12%, they start making demands, and they demand for changes, and they demand for certain people to be fired or sacked, and it's horrible. But I do see that people are waking up now, though I think it's a little bit too late. because Zuckerberg said, "Oh, I want free speech on my platform." Yeah, I think that's too late, Zuck. The moment he refused to delete one of Trump's tweets, like Twitter did, he had a massive walkout from his company. Like, these people, they unionize and they start working together like a collective, like a hive mind, if you will. And it's got nothing to do with the well-being of the company. They do this, like, even if it destroys the company, they would still do this. And the only way to protect yourself is to not hire these people. Like, learn the buzzwords that they use. If you see anyone have studies on his degree, like gender studies, social studies, black studies, anything with the studies, you should be skeptical. Don't even think about having an HR department. It's kind of funny, like these people, I remember a story where a woman got into Lionsgate's comic and she was a radical. And she was whining about, it's like, well, they don't have an HR department. Like, how can I get my boss fired? Like, literally, she made a blog and she was complaining, like, how can I get my boss fired if I don't have an HR department? So the first thing she does is she pushes for the company to have an HR department by using her connections from the journalistic press and whatnot, the comic book press, if you will. And then once they have the HR department, she tries to get her boss fired. She tries to get the most talented artist fired. And she actually succeeded. Like, she gets the most talented artist at the company fired. And again, it's not about the ideology that's a problem. Is that the quality of the company will start going down because the company initially hires people based on talent, right? Like, it's a capitalist environment. They want to have more talent than their competition. But when you start having the cult of the woke inside, they will actively fire your talent, and they would actively promote other people that have the same ideology as them to be hired. And something else that's happening is, like David Burge says here, identify a respected institution, kill it, gut it, and wear its carcass as a skin suit while demanding respect. Yeah, here's something else that they always do. And I think, like, the best example would be the United Nations. Okay, like, when you look at the United Nations, they have like a council that talk about women's rights, UN Women. And at the seat of the council, there was, I don't know if there still is, but it was Saudi Arabia. I mean, if you want a better example than this, I don't know what it is, but basically, you have a respectable institution, and once they co-opt it, they still expect that people will respect that institution. For example, UN human rights, okay? It gets co-opted by some of the nations that have very little, if no respect for human rights whatsoever. And then people demand that you still treat this institution with respect, even though it's obvious that is not the case, which is why I think United States pulled out from Human Rights Commission, just because it was just so blatantly co-opted. And they do this with a lot of things, usually with prizes and awards. Like, for example, the Pulitzer, if you watched it, you would be like, Jesus fucking Christ. You know, like, it's that type of thing. It's like, just because an award was given to something and it was a respectable and prestigious award, the moment it gets co-opted, and you start to notice that the award is given based on nepotism or on corruption rather than on merit, no one looks at it anymore. You know, it doesn't mean anything. And they expect you to still believe that it does mean something. Anyway, I think I talked a little bit too much. Let me know what you think about these other styles of videos where I'm not trying to be funny or talk about some news article. I'm just explaining to you tactics so you can understand what's happening. And yeah, I think, like, at the New York Times, they're already going to start firing people. They're just waiting for an excuse, just you know, trying to see that person say something ridiculous that they don't agree with, and boom, you're out, you're gone. And this is what the left created, by the way. Like, a lot of these people have encouraged cancel culture because they never thought it's going to be done against them, or they never thought that they're going to be next. I'm going to point you a pretty picture with this, and I'm going to end it. Imagine a place where the British aristocracy gather, and they're all, you know, really posh. They have demands on how you should properly drink the tea while lifting the little pinky, and they have on the table different forks and different knives, and they expect that you know what fork is for what and what knife is for what. And they have like a really strict adherence to protocol. They want you to act civilized. Like if you would go into that room, you would be criticized for having poor manners and whatnot. And in that room, I want you to imagine that there's a crocodile under the table. And every now and then the crocodile just rips someone's arm off or rips someone's leg off. And there's blood everywhere and there's guts, and it's, like a image from a horror film. But no one wants to acknowledge the existence of the crocodile, because every now and then, the moment someone does, he's going to be beaten out by everyone. Why is that happening? Because those people are hoping that at one point the crocodile is going to be filled. They're hoping that at one point the crocodile is going to stop. Or at the worst, they're hoping that the crocodile is going to eat them last. And they do this out of absolute cowardice, because if all the people in that room would go, all right, man, come on, let's get this beast out of here. And they would all unite and they would go and try to kick the crocodile out. Sure, yes, some of them are going to get hurt. But you know what? The ones that don't, the ones that manage will then have normal lives without living in utter fear and dread. But it's easier to just try and appease the crocodile, though. It's easier to just keep your head down, pretend that nothing is there, and again, like hope that the crocodile is going to be appeased or the crocodile is going to be satiated. Here's something interesting. They will come for you next. You will use the wrong pronoun. You will tell the wrong joke. You will make the wrong hand gesture. You will say the wrong word, wear the wrong clothes, order the wrong food, sing in the wrong song. Nobody can keep track of so many rules, not even you. Eventually, you will slip up, and they'll label you as far-right, bigoted, Islamophobic, knuckle-dragger, hateful, patriarch, etc. All your previous virtue signaling will count for nothing. These are crimes you cannot atone for. You see, these crimes can never be forgiven, for those who would forgive you can be tarred with the same brush. You'll be a persona non grata, unemployable, unloved, unwanted, shunned, just like those you currently torment. This is the brave new world you have created. Welcome to the purity spiral, because it's a long way down.